So, welcome to CBDIA, CBD Industry Association panel. Today we are going to discuss predictions of CBD and the CBD industry moving forward. And I will let everybody introduce themselves. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Peter Holsworth. I conducted the first legal transaction of THC in the United States as the founder and CFO, CIO of BioTrack THC, where we built the state government regulatory system for Washington, Illinois, New Mexico, New York, and Hawaii. Today, BioTrack remains the single most widely used seed-to-sale processing technology in the world, processing about $8.5 billion of cannabis this year. I've been in the industry for a very long time. I served as the director of cannabis client services for a Fortune 500 law firm called Zuber Lawler, where we achieved the first new dietary ingredient designation with the FDA, the first generally recognized as safe designation with the FDA, the first ever cannabinoid-based plant patent with the Patent and Trademark Office, associating that with ethical homeostasis effects and metabolism absorption by human beings.
Well done. Hi, how you doing? My name is Colby Watkins. I'm the founder of the CBD and Cannabis Professional Business Network, currently the largest group on LinkedIn for CBD and cannabis, also co-founder of Where's Hemp, which is an online business-to-business platform helping companies find other companies and make transactions both international and domestic. Currently, we have a heavy focus on international logistics and transportation. Yeah, that's it.
Hi, my name is John Leja. I am the former CEO, founder of PharmaCannabis, a large state, multi-state operator in the state of Illinois. Exited them in 2016. Have since started up Ivic Holdings, a Canadian-based company with fully owned operations in Canada, Colombia, partially owned operations in Australia. Also American Fiber, a U.S. holding company with verticals in Michigan and Delaware.
Hello, everybody. Ryan McFarland. I'm a co-founder, CEO of Where's Hemp, Colby's business partner, actually. So how you doing over there? So far away. As Colby mentioned, we're a publisher of market data in the space. We've taken the big data approach, taking licensee information, public record information, obviously information that we've pulled off of LinkedIn and our LinkedIn group. We've established a pretty unique way to market to people with big tech making it pretty difficult to get your product or service to market. We found a way to kind of bypass that and do a lot of B2B marketing as well as B2C micro distribution channel marketing. So that's essentially a little bit about us. We facilitate marketing campaigns and also facilitate trades on the wholesale market for CBD and other cannabinoids. So nice to meet y'all.
Well, as you can see, we do have a great panel here. Everybody has so much experience and information that they would like to share with you. So actually, we're going to start off. I'm going to change this up a bit. Now that everybody knows their specialties, what they do, who they are, if anybody has a question about anything right off the bat that you want to know, let's start off that way.
There you go.
We'll bring a mic over to you. Okay.
That makes two of us.
When do you think, if you have any idea on federal legislation of the passing, like, think across the board, any hunch through?
Do you mind if I jump in?
Can I clarify? Is it for CBD, for cannabis? Yeah, okay.
I'm going to start this off, and I'm sure I can tell that everybody is just waiting, but I'm going to jump in first.
Right.
It's a great question.
I like to be first this time. So if you look at CBD, the FDA has already given you the platform by which they are going to regulate the market. It's just coming. So the application of CBD to get into a big box retailer for your formulations either applies for an ingestible product, making sure it's safe for human consumption or pet consumption, recognized as a generally recognized as safe designation, or a new dietary ingredient, an NDI designation with the FDA. These are the two pathways besides a new drug application, which is $1 billion 10-year process, or a new drug plant application, which is much shorter, but still lengthy. Those two designations are your key to ensuring that your product will make it into big box retail. Without those two designations by the FDA, which takes about $100,000, maybe $150,000 of legal work and about a year's period of time of testing, you're unable to get into big box retail because Walmart will never take the risk of their reputation, their billion-dollar reputation on your brand, right? So by ensuring that you apply for those, even if you're not first to market with your exact application, ability to put an efficacy claim. This will put me to sleep. This removes inflammation. This actually does what it says it will do. That's the problem with the industry right now, is that there's a lack of that enforcement, and it's coming. So from a cannabinoid standpoint, we're looking maybe 6 to 8 months, and it's been accelerated by D8.
Yeah, I think that's right. And you can, just to add to that, you can look what the FDA is doing. About a year or so ago, they started issuing warning letters, people making health claims on their product, right? So everybody knows now you can't say it cures cancer. So everybody backed away from that. But then a lot of people started putting in active ingredients plus CBD, making a health claim on the active. What's that mean? It means you menthol plus CBD, and then you say this helps relieve pain, because menthol in certain concentrations is known to relieve pain, called the monograph. So the FDA, beginning of March, issued a letter saying no to that. And what we know from talking to the FDA is that they have started to see a rapid increase in adverse event reporting for products that were including actives plus CBD. They're quite worried about that. And so if you include that active ingredient, you're actually making a health claim, whether you recognize it or not. You're making it by including that active ingredient. So they stamp down on that. The big issue is safety. To us is safety. There's a liver study going on. I think ValidCare is running one. They've finished up a human trial. A lot of participants, whether that will go to a general safety designation or some dietary supplement carve out with specific prescriptions per product, all kind of to be seen. But the FDA is really telling you where they're going on these products, and more regulation, not less. And not just big box, but if you're not within that, getting the data and then doing everything else to support your product. If you want a unique product, there's a lot of work there.
May I add one more thing? To ensure that your product receives, easy logistics across state lines or sovereign borders, ensure that you have a full chain of custody. Identifying the compliance of the seed or cutting or clone that you're utilizing, as well as a licensed producer of hemp, and demonstrating that full chain of custody will assist you a lot in any type of transportation complications.
Yeah, I think what the market is going to see is all of those big players that have adhered to that food grade standard, right? The chain of custody, the seed to sale, following good manufacturing principles. Those are going to be the first at the top of the line to get the nod of approval from an FDA level. There's going to be obviously standards and licensing that you have to adhere to, but you're also going to see the market kind of suck in, where you have all these people who haven't been adhering to that, and that's what the market needs and wants. Is because when someone's taking a tincture, someone's taking an ingestible, they without following that full chain of custody back, without making sure that it was produced in a good manufacturing principle manner, they're leaving themselves at risk, especially as you were just speaking about the adverse effects of adding in additional active ingredients, right? Because there simply hasn't been a precedent of testing to make sure that they don't have adverse effects on each other.
Well said.
And then what made me chuckle when you asked that question is, well, what's going to happen with THC? Boy, that's I think we've all seen the reporting that came out of Senator Schumer saying they're going to address cannabis, whether or not Biden wants it or not. Boy, I don't know. I'd love to hear the thoughts on the panel, but myself. But I think we're going to see banking number one, and then that'll open up capital flows even more. And then the race is really on, in my opinion, to regulatory compliance, FDA. I think the FDA is just waiting when it comes to CBD. They're waiting for the industry to get there. They always want to regulate it. So as players do get there on compliance, when it comes to safety and efficacy, human trial data studies, they're going to continue to tighten, but they can't do it until the industry is there. THC, it has to be an active ingredient. What's it going to be required? The timing, boy, I don't know.
Yeah, I think Peter nailed it. That the pathway is already there, right? It's already set the actual roadmap to get there. It's just when the rest of the other industries and ancillary services catch up to that level of standardization of a true food grade. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the EU has already, announced that there's been a lot of studies that have been positive in the EU. So might also help speed up the FDA, and they put a little kick in the
Right,
kick in the behind.
So that
Market
was
is
going to be
exploding.
my next question, was about internationally. Like, is there somewhere, another country that we should definitely be looking at that has the model correctly, that we should have them as an example? Or is it, let's say, easier to find that pathway in another country versus the United States?
Yeah, I mean, with novel foods, they haven't established it yet, but everyone has their applications in line at this point, right? So, people that are looking to use cannabinoids in novel foods in the EU, UK, they're going to have to apply for that, right? And basically, I think it was 1992 is when novel foods kind of came out in the EU. So the people that are in line for that now are going to be set up to start sending over there, but it's not established yet. It's there, it's close to being written, but they haven't started approving applications over there. But there's tons of people getting in line to start establishing supply lines and trade agreements and supply agreements with EU food and beverage companies at this point, because they're going to be ahead of us. And once food and beverage, or once cannabinoids can go into big box food and beverage that have existing consumer packaged good distribution channels already set up, it's a game changer, no doubt. So.
Standards for ingredients, then finished goods. And you can think subcategorize finished goods. Cosmetics, very different on a topical, what's coming, we think, versus opposed to an adjustable. Novel food versus over-the-counter drug. You have all these subcategories of what's going on. They're all going to be little different variants. EU has gone with novel food. US quite not there yet. Dietary supplement, it's just a lot of variants here. From our standpoint, on the production side, we're producing in Colombia. Look, the serious players, serious importers, there's just a few of them. They're looking at foreign supplier verifications, auditing programs, obviously your GACP, GMP production. They're putting those components in place that you already see in major industries. Those are the critical developments. And if you're not there, you're not pushing them, whether internally or domestically or internationally, I think you'll be hard pressed to compete.
He's absolutely right. We represented, as part of the law firm, we represented one of the licensees in Mexico, which is a combination of the largest agricultural producer and a combination of the largest generic drug manufacturer in Mexico, which manufactures 350 generic drugs, importing them to 42 countries now. So it really is about the efficacy of your brand and how you culture brand loyalty and brand premium. That's done through producing a consistent consumer experience. And the only way you do that is by controlling the inputs. So control your inputs, understand where you're sourcing it from for these ethical gentlemen up here, and then take that formulation, that consistent consumer experience, and apply that for your designations. That'll ensure that your brand will last in the commoditization of this industry.
Yeah, and it's interesting from what I've been seeing, tell me if you guys agree, is that the EU, Switzerland, they have everything what seems to be in line for that novel food. So they're a little bit more ahead in that regard. But in terms of the actual raw materials going into it, those inputs that Peter was just referring to, the USA seems to be where everybody wants to get their products. So now it's a matter of how do we help export into there? What are those defining lines? So for example, in the US, to be considered non-detect for THC, that's under 0.1 for an LOQ for testing, and then you're non-detect. In the UK, you're 0.05. So if you're at 0.05, if you said something that's non-detect in the US, but you haven't adhered to the standards of the UK, then you could get yourself in trouble.
In customs.
Yeah, you're not gonna. Yeah, exactly. So it's
getting it back.
Yeah, exactly. It's understanding those standards, and it's understanding what the differentiators are in terms of laws. And then once you've made those headways, that headway makes it extremely valuable.
Yeah, and not to go too fast on this, but if you see, these markets develop. The United States, quite frankly, California, phenomenal at developing brands and products. Look at what's happened to Canada. They've lost that advantage. And so you have brand products coming fast and being fast and furious to develop in the United States. But many of the players here are not really up to regulatory compliance, production standards. But there are people that are doing that. So I think you're probably going to see the bust up of the vertical. I'm not so sure what the challenge of the MSO and the MSO brands will be through the CBD space. But there's a lot of interesting things will happen as legalization. As the THC markets start to legalize, do you have CBD brands then fold into traditional medical marijuana, take over that brand space? We're going to have a lot more experience on the brand and consumer market generally as opposed to the dispensary consumer market.
Right. So let me ask another question based on that, based on brand. So if somebody is, let's say, a startup or getting ready to be in the industry, number one, do you think they missed the boat? And number two, based on what you're seeing, is it better for them to go through a manufacturer that already has everything in place and white label through that way? Or is it better for them to start from the ground up, do it how they want it, have a say in it, and have everything in place?
I think that's a fantastic question. I think there's a lot of things to consider when trying to start out in an emerging market that's already had arms and legs. And I think what I would do personally is I look for how to differentiate myself in the market, and I'd most likely go to differentiate myself to holding myself at a level of standard that I know the market is going. So, for example, maybe using, and you probably wouldn't need like an API, an active pharmaceutical ingredient product in your material, but it's nice to have in your branding. So, if you're going to enter what is now what seems like a saturated market, then go in there with a differentiator, right? Is it USDA certified organic? Fact on foot, there really hasn't been any USDA certified organic gummy manufacturers out there. For the first one to actually get the whole gummy USDA certified organic, I think there's a huge market there for them. To answer your question, part two on the white labeling, I think that has everything to do with your team, right? So if you have a bunch of PhDs on your team who are able to go out there and do testing, do some op-eds, and write and have the level of influence to be able to make a claim or be able to make headway on a federal front or a policy front, then I think absolutely do it yourself. If you just want to get into the industry and create a brand and know that your level of standard is never going to be attacked because you went with a good white label manufacturer who adheres to all the principles, I think that's a little bit more adverse risk than taking it on yourself. But I think it's all about who you're surrounding yourself with and then what angle on the market you're going to take.
And how much capital you've raised, because obviously if you haven't raised $25 million, you're not going to be setting up a USDA certified organic EU CGMP facility manufacturing seed to shelf, right? So, so I mean, for my particular thing is obviously proof of concept is key, right? So if you're starting a brand, identify a differentiator, launch it, market it, get sales, get proof of concept, and then as you scale, then consolidating as more and more brands come into the market, prices will eventually go down, right? So how do you forecast that? How do you get set up for that? Well, it's all about consolidations. Either contract farming instead of owning your own farm, contract a farmer to go and farm, 5 acres or 10 acres or how much oil you expect that you're going to be able to produce, right? You can also contract a lab. You don't have to open up the own lab, but there's labs out there that will rent you line time that have all the certifications. They've already spent the time, the energy, and the money to get set up, and you can literally go and buy line time at their facility, right? And so you don't necessarily need to own everything to control the process. And that's, I think, what you're asking is like, how do you control the process? That's how you do it without, spending all the big money up front.
Perfect.
So that would be my
I think there's plenty of time when it comes to the product side. But I think, as kind of the panelist said, you really have to do your homework. And try not to do everything. We talked about busting up the vertical. So coming up with an interesting product, market differentiation, look at a brand like Equilibria, MyEQ. They're this woman-focused brand I have no connection to, woman-focused brand, subscription model, just really killing it on social media. There's plenty of room for that. The leaders in the CBD space of a year ago are not the leaders this year. And there's just tremendous change coming. Do people want to see indication-specific formulations? This product works well for hemorrhoids. Who knows? It's not clear that that's how people will buy it. Maybe they care about skincare, cosmetics. That's a safe area regulatory-wise compared to some others. Maybe they wanted a beverage. I've been in this industry since 2012. I don't know necessarily where the consumers are going. We're trying to place our own bets. We're much more interested in supporting brands, supporting companies that want to launch and go after various markets worldwide. So, but we very much believe there's time.
I would also add, if you're looking at starting a brand, again, to your point, don't be everything to everybody, right? Find your differentiation. There's a lot of Me Too products out there. And a Me Too product is, you got a vape? Oh, Me Too. And you don't want to necessarily fall in that category. There's differentiation in your manufacturing processes, but also know your consumer. After the first $1.4 billion of sales we did in the legal cannabis market, the THC Delta 9 market in Washington and Colorado through our systems, we found that the highest spending demographic was a female, 35 to 45, who spent 1.87 times the next highest spending demographic, and she visited that retail location 1.37 times as often. So she's your decision maker. If you're looking at cannabinoid-based products without a psychoactive, you're looking at somebody who spends money, who's educated on their health, They're probably college educated. They probably have expendable income. They're probably leading the decision making for a family. And that's probably a female consumer. So if you think about how she leads, the female consumer is actually the leader of the household. They decide where they're vacationing, what they eat, what the kids wear, where they go to school. Let her be empowered by her choices of that consumerism and apply your brand to the efficacy that'll empower the entire family.
Yeah, one more thing, just piggybacking off of Peter's, is really defining your niche, right? So if you're a founder of a company and you are formerly a chiropractor, don't go out and make a tincture to go sell to head shops. Sell it to other chiropractors within your network. In other words, take your niche, just become the master of that niche, get other references in that niche, and then you're able to grow, right? The riches are in the niche, as one of my business partners says. And that's what we tell our clients all the time, is we learn a little bit more about, their brand history before we actually say, okay, this is who your target market is. Because what that question is a huge question that a lot of brands have is, what industry do I want to go into? Because going into smoke and head shops is not, is too hard to get into. It's too saturated. And we always say, well, create a micro distribution channel, become the thought leader within that distribution channel, and then use those references to go reference other people, other sales where you've been successful within that distribution channel. And not to keep going, but when you get into the rhythm of selling into a specific industry, you're constantly hearing those pain points, and naturally you get into a sales rhythm where you're fielding the exact same pain points. You're referencing how you overcame those challenges with other people within that industry, and then you kind of leverage that to position yourself as a thought leader. That's all.
All right. So that was quite a bit. Did that answer your question? Okay, good. So actually, let's touch base on capital. I know, Ryan, you talked about banking. So let's touch base a little bit on capital. How to get capital? Where does it come from? How to go about it? If I'm a startup, or you can even tell your story of how you started, what you started with, and how you grew your own company.
Yeah, we're actually bootstrapped. We haven't gone for a raise at this point. We've entertained a couple M&A deals that have come to us, but we haven't proceeded with them. So we bootstrapped our company and built it without raising capital. Capital's not off the table at this point, but I think if we were to raise capital, we'd want smart capital. We'd want capital that was coming in with some other strategic partner. So if we were going to merge or take capital in, we'd want to merge with somebody that, let's say, had a vertical setup. They had a farm and a lab and a manufacturing process, or they had distribution channels internationally or domestically that we could tap into. So, just raising capital for the fact of raising capital is not really we're not in a position to need that at this point. But, if we were to raise capital, obviously having your ducks in a row, having your subscription documents, your PPM available, all the legal documents, having a nice, deck put together and all your financials put together is key. And then there's a lot of platforms out there. You have a lot of the crowdfunding platforms that, people are raising on, Kickstarters if you have a product. So, there's various ways to raise. You don't have to just go straight equity. You can do a combination of debt and equity, and, also just, maybe paying out, what's the word I'm looking for? The finder's fees and things of that nature. So, we haven't actually raised. So maybe somebody else can talk a little bit further on that.
Since becoming an entrepreneur, 2012, I raised a little over $100 million total through all my companies. At the same time, if anybody knows how to raise capital, it can teach me. I'm would love to hear.
Asking grandma doesn't count.
When I was raising capital for international companies, I was a guy from Chicago going to Canada, Toronto, talking to family offices, high net worth individuals, asking them to give me money to grow weed in Colombia. And depending on where the market's at, it's possible. I've raised through straight equity, convertible notes, debt. It's changed. It changed so much year to year, and it seems to be different now. There's a lot of interest. People want revenue. You got to be at revenue, or it's so close that they can taste it. That's the big thing, because the industry moving so quick that 2-3 years down the road to revenue makes things very, very difficult. I think you have to be flexible. Partnerships, relationships, making sure you have all the pieces of the puzzle in taking, and I would say to any entrepreneur, small business owner, taking a smaller piece of the pie to reduce your risk, you're probably underestimating the risk factor of what you're trying to do. But there's always capital there. Lots of people always say, oh, there's tons of capital in the silence. Sometimes they're looking for certain amounts, and what your company needs is not the amount. I'm sure we've all heard that story. It's easier to raise 25 million than it is to raise 2 million sometimes. So I don't know if there's any specific advice. If anybody has it, I'd love to hear it myself, because we're always constantly needing to raise for various entities and things we're going after. But I think things are thawing from where they were last year, obviously. I'm sure we all feel that. CBD has its challenges, but to me, the big issue is regulatory, pharma. People understand that the OTC, there are big opportunities here that most industry currently are not going to be able to capitalize on.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the only piece of advice that I could have is just know when to get advice, right? So taking that $1,500, $2,000 to spend on an actual consultant who can help you get your ducks in a line, help you understand what you're getting yourself into, and help you understand what's a good deal and what's a bad deal. Because me and Ryan have just seen it personally for our what we were offered didn't pan out to be a good deal, right? We decided against it, but at first it looked like a big shiny object, but we ended up getting advice and realized, okay, this isn't exactly going to be advantageous for us. So I think it's being aware of what you're getting yourself into, because that's what they do day in and day out, is they look for investment opportunities and they figure out how to get the best deal for themselves. And I think just coming from an entrepreneurial side of just, growing and creating a brand and stuff like that, you've never had that exposure. I would just say my advice is know when to get advice.
My last piece of advice, I've been raising capital, feels like since '89. So I tell you, it's a full-time job. Don't shirk it. When I went into BioTrack in 2013, I walked into this office and these guys were just inept at running a business. They were running around with their heads cut off. And I walked in there, I said, okay, you guys try and figure this out. I'll raise the capital in 6 months or I'll fire myself. And I was lucky enough to cold call Steve Case from America Online. And within 3 months, he formed Greenfield Capital, and we closed and locked and turned that deal. But that doesn't always happen that way. My best advice to you is if you're an operator, if you're trying to put this business together, if you're the CEO, be the CEO. If I meet a CEO who's at this conference raising capital, I'm thinking to myself, first question, who's running your company? I don't want to see a CEO out here raising capital. That scares the shit out of me as a capital investor. So I want to see somebody professional who knows how to raise capital and spend money to raise capital. If you have to spend 15 grand to be at 3 pitch events, 5 grand a piece, you'll raise your money so much faster. It takes money to make money.
All right. Let's open it up for another question. Does anybody have any other questions?
Following up on that line about capital and the equity, what kind of equity splits do you guys see with capital investors?
What
That's a pretty broad question, little lady.
Can I ask one question for you? Also, what sector of the industry are you in?
Cultivation.
Okay. Does that help?
Yeah.
Cultivation is the largest price compression taking place in any agricultural commoditized product. So you have to understand the future economics of cultivation first before I'd recommend getting into it, assuming you know that and assuming you're already down the path and you have a good offering. In the business prior to a revenue achievement and prior to your first cycle and whatnot, I would highly suggest you take in debt capital, a convertible debenture instrument. This will allow you to set an interest rate by which you can meet via your revenues, as well as allow the investor to have the option to convert their debt into equity at a later time in the equity cycle. This will also allow you to utilize that capital and get the higher rates of revenue, which will allow you to have a higher valuation of your company and raise your original equity dilution round at a higher valuation, which will dilute you and all your other principals less. It'll also give your convertible debenture holder an opportunity to invest at a discount to that round A, so that they feel they've gotten equity at a, because if you get equity at the early stages, you're going to give up a lot more equity for that capital investment, right? Opposed to being at revenue. And B, it secures your investment in yourself. You're now servicing a debt instrument, which you have the ability to repay if you choose so. Most times the investor has the first right of refusal in those instruments, but you can manipulate it any way you want. But debt is always my first suggestion.
I think
Yeah,
that also
I've seen
probably
the
makes
splits
the
just
debtor feel
vary
safer as well.
dramatically.
Oh yeah.
And now a cultivation asset, that's hard, especially depending on what phase you're at in cultivation. Are you already up in a revenue, or are you looking to just start building? I mean, both of those are different scenarios, but as he's mentioned, there's been massive price compression in that market, commoditization, and now you're up against foreign competitors. So
This guy, I brought the point up about Colombia and Mexico because that one client had a 20 square kilometer environmentally controlled greenhouse. That one facility could put out the entire cultivation market in the United States out of business when the DEA starts to allow them to import. So the longest and
production cost of 5 cents a gram, below 5 cents a gram.
the shortest and longest days difference in Colombia is 41 minutes. That's why we grow our fresh cut flowers, vegetables. They're great at it. I can hire a PhD lab tech in Colombia for $35,000. So the cultivation cycle in the United States, unfortunately, unless we turn to more infrastructure like industrialized hemp applications like my shoes, has a very limited runway in the United States. Flysoleshoes.com.
Sometimes maybe this helps rather than talk about splits. It's that when you're raising capital, you're raising capital for a certain thing at that moment, but what you're also trying to do is project the next step. So you got to make sure you have step one that you're raising capital for, step two. Step two is sometimes the bigger vision and hope, and you're tying them together. We're raising capital for cultivation. That's the valuation, $10 million, $3 million, a $10 million val, maybe convert, cap, or whatever it is, 20% preference. But then, but once cultivation is done, we're going to be processing and producing this product. And so there's you're always trying to pitch hope to some degree.
You have financing options though if you can ensure exit contracts. So if depending on your geography, there's multiple of different companies from topicals to ingestibles to vitamins to supplements that are getting into this market, and it'll only expand for the next couple of years. So my best suggestion to you is if you're looking to cultivation, harness the asset of land that you have. Try to partner with your end contract, the guy that's going to buy that biomass. Go to some of these extractors that are surviving this wave of price compression and bounce that we're receiving right now, and say, listen, you're my ideal, you're the exit for my product. Let's be partners on this input. And we'll control that input because so many times these extractors are receiving biomass of various concentrations, of various cultivation techniques, of various geographies, various terpene profiles. They don't all run the same. We try to run crude through one of our machines that had 9% sugar in it. They're not all the same. So by homogenizing your entire supply chain into a vertical, you get to control the input. And that input control will ensure a consistent consumer experience, which will never lead to brand premium and loyalty.
One thing just to add what you said, Peter, some of the clients that we've been working with that started with cultivation and raised capital, their plan of raising capital was to go and acquire, like Peter said, end consumers, right? The actual end consumer brands and set up a more of a vertical type of process. So you have some type of exit. You're not just cultivating, growing, hoping they will come, right? It's like if they build it, they will come. That is not true. So don't go along that plan.
Right. I've seen cultivators already have their contracts even before they put seeds in the ground. So that's also good. So one last question to our panel is, if you were to leave here today and give our audience pieces of advice, let's say, what would your top 5 pieces of advice be?
Who wants to go first?
Well, 5's a lot, so I'll start, but might run out. The first thing I would be is to know your market. Know who you're going to sell to. before you decide to invest, this is number 2, before you decide to invest capital, before you decide to, take on a venture, make sure that you have those contracts in place. Before the seeds are in the ground is great, but make sure that before you're growing, you have an exit, because unfortunately what happened last year is there was so much material and those exits weren't structured. And those are, and obviously those people are where they are. The third would be to, know the legalities of where you're at currently, but also where the market is going. I know that's a tough double-edged sword to do, but just make sure that if there is a lower hanging fruit for people who aren't, who aren't being above board, make sure you're in the top 90% of the people who are. So when that axe comes, you're way above it, right? Because you don't want to be in a position where, you didn't know that you had to have this sort of, you weren't able to make this claim on a package and all of a sudden you get bumped by the FDA. I think three's what I got right now.
All right.
I would say certifications, right? So just making sure whatever you do, I mean, depending on what stage in the supply chain that you're at, get set up for what's coming, right? We all know that there's existing, regulations, there's existing pathways, like Peter had said earlier, as to what the FDA is going to want, right? They're going to want CGMP, they're going to want ISO, they're going to want some level of SQF potentially, right? So understand the regulations if you're in the manufacturing sector, and focus on getting certified now, because the last thing you want to do is get set up, spend millions of dollars on equipment, and then have to go and scrap it all and rebuy it, right? Because it comes down to the screws that are in the equipment, if you're not certified correctly, that you have to replace, and you have to scrap the whole thing. So, certifications and know what's coming and get set up now to comply with that. Secondly, I would say, have some level of marketing component set up, right? Understand the marketing landscape. You cannot market on the big platforms. You can't go buy ads on Google pay-per-click typically. Sometimes they're starting to open up a little bit, but have a marketing plan. Understand what the issues are in the space. You're not a typical company that can go turn on Google pay-per-click, Facebook ads, Instagram ads. You can't do it. So how are you going to get your product to market? How are you going to sell what you're developing, whether it's seeds, biomass, raw materials, or finished goods? It doesn't matter. It's all the same thing. So understand what the marketing hurdles are and figure out a plan before you get in how to go about that. Eventually, I would say in the next 5 years, they will open up, so be first, right? So, also have an agency set to be first. I'm getting a cut sign, so I'm just gonna give you 2. Go ahead, guys.
The boss in the back.
I would a lot of great advice up here. So I would just add, the days of trying to become an MSO and you're going to be worth, $5 billion and be verticals in all these states and do all these things. The CBD market can be so huge. I think those days are past, but it is a tremendous market. There's tremendous growth. There's tremendous opportunity. So really make sure you understand the entire value chain and what's going on. What are the forces that are acting upon the elements of the value chain? Massive pressure on cultivation from large-scale domestic cultivation. With international, we've been planning international, I'm sure, on this table for 4 or 5 years, and with imports now coming to the United States. So make sure you understand the value chain and then where you fit. And then once you say, look, I got a special skill in distribution or logistics, then figure out how you can add value, differentiate yourself. The market is growing in CBD. It's real. I hear that from cosmetic manufacturers, pharmaceutical companies all the time now. They've turned the corner. This market is real. They believe in it. It's here to stay. So you can add value. You can get a piece of it, but don't try to bite off more than you can chew.
I'll give you the best piece of
we
advice
go.
from experience in this industry. Know who you're working with. Life is all about the guy that's in the foxhole with you. You know he's going to get up at midnight and take your call because that's an emergency in your business. That's the guy you work with. I've had, from the beginning of this industry, I've had so many people tell me yes when they really meant no. After all that experience, I can tell you, I keep my circle of guys that I know very close because I know I can call them up. They'll do exactly what they say they're going to do. That comes down to everything. You can have a mediocre product and a great team, you're going to win. You can have a great product and a shit team, you're definitely losing. So it's all about the team.
Well,
Very
thank
good
you
point.
guys.
Well said.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us.